Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It is the summer months. We do not stop. There is lots of content to get to. Don't forget to tell your friends. They can like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Get this conservative message out. You can also download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. On today's show, we are going to be talking about the sad decline in Canadian living standards, and to talk about that and much, much more, we bring on the one and only Tracy Gray, the Member of Parliament for Kelowna Lake Country. Thank you very much for taking time out of your beautiful schedule.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And your beautiful riding. My goodness, I can't believe you are, representing such an amazing riding in this country, in British Columbia, and the summer's the time to really enjoy that.
It's a wonderful riding and incredible people.
Yes.
That are in my riding for sure.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, Thank you very much for coming on the show. I know we're going to talk about something that is difficult to talk about, and that is the declining living standards of Canadians over 9 years, after 9 years of Justin Trudeau. And every metric, we were talking just before the show, every metric is just getting worse for everyday Canadians. Well, the middle and the those on the lower end of the income scale are getting squeezed the most. The wealthy just seem to be getting better off as time goes along under this Liberal government.
Yeah, the working class have really been crushed during the 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, and the results of their policies and legislations have really been playing out. You're now seeing the results of those. So there's so many different metrics that we can look at that is then playing out in people's everyday lives. So when you look at, for example, the GDP per capita, and I know that the Liberals quite often will talk about GDP, but that's like, having a company where you're talking about gross sales.
Yeah.
And then saying, oh, our company is doing great, which it might be, but you also have to look at costs, right? You might be close to bankruptcy, even though your sales might be up. And so GDP per capita is much more relevant. And that does actually show how productive a country is.
The meat in Canada, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that people themselves aren't working hard. It just means as a country as a whole, and our productivity is down, and what that means is that our quality of life is down, and we can see this rate across the board. We actually have one of the worst GDP per capitas in OECD, and we're on track to actually be the worst. And the OECD has actually said that if we don't change our policies here in Canada, we actually will be the worst. And so for quality of life, you're looking at, we can just see what's playing out in our neighborhoods. We know that it's harder for people to live. We see homelessness encampments are up, mental health, more mental health challenges. Youth are saying that they will never afford a home. They're losing hope. We know that rents have doubled over the last 9 years. The cost of housing has doubled. Mortgage payments are up. And we know that interest rates are still more than double, than they were 4 years ago. So it's going to be really hard for people that are refinancing their mortgages, and for anyone trying to get into owning a home for young Canadians. It's really challenging for them, and they're losing hope.
And there's this whole generation that has kind of lost out on the dream that your generation, my generation, I'm pretty sure we're relatively the same in age, but and all before us, they had that opportunity to get a good job, to get a house, start a family, and start that cycle. There is a group here, a generation here, that will not be able to, or it's going to be very difficult for them to achieve that major piece. And it's sad.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly sad, because it used to be that if you worked hard, you could, probably have a decent car, save enough for a down payment. And it used to be on average that for the average home, about 5 to 7 years to save for a down payment. It now takes more than 25 years across the country, and even longer in places like Vancouver. It's up to close to 30 years to save for a down payment. So, if you're someone in your 20s, you're now looking at your 50s before you'll be able to afford a home. And so that's really, really tough really tough for people, really tough for the working class. And another metrics that isn't looking good are the unemployment numbers. So from May to May 2023 to 2024, it's a percentage up. And it's on a trajectory to keep increasing as well. So unemployment is another indicator that the economy is not strong.
Yeah, and so government has three ways basically to raise revenue, right? They can tax, borrow, or print using a combination thereof, and to an excess can, debauch the currency of the economy. We're seeing a lot of that happening with what Justin Trudeau did. But what people expect, what taxpayers expect is service for dollars, right? They expect value. And one thing that we're seeing is that almost the entire, well, I'll let you say it. Let's cue up cut one. The revenue collected from the GST, it's not going for services. So let's play cut one.
Budget 2024 forecasts that the federal debt will rise to $1.2 trillion this year. And the interest Canadians will pay in servicing that debt will increase to $54 billion this fiscal year. That's more than the government intends to spend on provincial healthcare transfers. The budget also shows that the government raised $51 billion in revenue from GST last year.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? It's just going to service. That's it. We're getting no value from that tax.
Yeah, the cost for us to service the debt in Canada just keeps increasing. And those numbers that we're seeing for the debt, that's going to keep increasing. And so that means that there is less money to spend on healthcare transfers. There's less money to spend on all of the services and maybe initiatives that the government might want to spend on. So it's putting us in a really difficult position. And especially when we've seen the finance minister recently saying, do you want a country that wants to leave debt to their children? Well, that's in fact what they're doing.
Yeah, big time.
That's in fact what they're doing. And they've incurred the debt not just during the time of COVID, because they were already in debt before, but they've continued on with that spending.
Yeah. And housing starts are down. Housing starts are down. Let's cue up cut two. Let's hear more of Tracy Gray in committee here. Play cut two.
Claims were made in Liberal Budget 2024 that they will build 3.87 million homes by 2031, or about 550,000 homes per year. So for every day of the year for the next 7 years, that's completing 1,515 homes each day, or one home every 57 seconds. So given what builders are saying, how realistic is this?
Not a chance.
That's pretty impactful right there.
It is very
They
impactful.
have no plan to achieve their actual housing goals, despite the fact they keep repeating those same talking points.
They have spent a lot of money. The Liberals have spent billions of dollars, and yet the results are poor. So we haven't seen a government that has spent so much to achieve so little. And we've had similar testimony from other witnesses at the Housing Committee, basically saying the same thing in different ways. And so it's very consistent right across the board, saying, there's just no way that these numbers that the Liberals have come up with are actually achievable.
See, the Liberals, I think, just in observing them over the last 9 years, they like to start the clock at the point where the crisis happened, not how we got here, right? The Conservatives like to look at the whole picture, because government will say, and this Liberals will say, well, we have a program, right? We have a new program to fix the problem that we created in the first place. We look back and figure out how we got here, right? And we like to not stop doing what the Liberals are doing. But at the same point, I think the Liberals do recognize that when people are desperate, they do turn to government, right? And they seem to feed off this idea of dependence on the government. I guess that's the leftist mindset. But the government will provide, right? But at the same time, I think that's why when we talk about indicators today on the show, overall happiness is down, the enjoyment of life, Canadians are more stressed than ever, mental health is up, addictions are up, homelessness is up, because what we have known for so long is being overturned by this liberal ideology.
Yes, and so we're looking at cause and effect.
Cause and effect, that's right.
Cause and effect. So what are the results of the actions that you have made?
That's right.
And so, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for that to play out. And we've now seen after 9 years the effects of the Liberal and being propped up by the NDP, their policies and their legislation. And so now we're seeing the results. Yes. And so they're trying to sort of come out with different programs and different Band-Aids to try and, help with help, as they say, with some of these situations, but they're not actually fixing the causes, which is the increasing debt, which is increasing taxes. When you look at the carbon tax, how that is playing out and increasing costs everywhere, they're not acknowledging that. They're not acknowledging the causes that are actually then affecting the results that we're seeing. And that's part of the issue. And that's why it's really important for us to accentuate that and to really bring it up so that people know that, no, this is actually, the Liberal government has caused these issues based on decisions that they've been making over the last 9 years.
The biggest pollutant to an organic economy is the government itself, right? And the more, like you said, the more the government expands its tentacles into places it should not be or has never gone before, the less choice, the less quality that Canadians get, because if the government's the only one providing it or the government's the only one doing it, you get what the government gives you, whether you like it or not, whether you need it or not. Sometimes you reach for that hand, right? But it's the clenched fist behind their back that you don't see coming.
Yeah, and I mean the higher cost of living is really playing out for people, and we hear it every day. I hear it from residents in my community. I'm sure you do, and we all do. Just how tough it is for people, how they're making those really tough decisions. Of not children not being able to do certain activities, how they're not going to visit relatives this summer, how they're not going to be able to save for maybe a different home, and if your family's expanding. And so people are having to make really tough decisions, and it is affecting people's everyday lives. I mean, just look at food banks.
Yeah.
Food bank usage is the highest ever in Canadian history. That's a result. That is a result of Liberal policy, and they're not wanting to talk about that.
No, they'll tell you life's never been so good.
Yes. Life has never been so good, and everything is wonderful, but that's not the reality for many people, for many Canadians. And when you look at seniors on a fixed income, the costs just keep going up. They don't have any alternative.
Nope.
We heard actually at that committee, the Human Resources Committee, we have quite a wide portfolio, and so we deal with housing, but also we've had, for example, we did a study on volunteerism. And the testimony there was so impactful because we had a lot of not-for-profits coming through saying that they're losing volunteers, seniors, because they're having to go back to work. They're losing volunteers because people can't afford to come to volunteer because of the cost of fuel, and so they're losing volunteers that way. They're losing donations because people just don't have the capacity anymore, and they're seeing people that are clients that used to be that used to be people that donated there. And so that kind of information is, again, those are the results that we're seeing of 9 years of this NDP Liberal government's policies.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Wherever I go in my community, I hear that, right? It's getting tougher to find volunteers. Service clubs are shrinking in some cases, not able to attract those volunteers because life is so different under this government, right? And this is a time where charities are most needed because as you pointed out multiple times over the show, the indicators are showing that people are struggling ever more than before.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's and people want to help. People want to help. They want to give. And so if people have the extra resources themselves as a family, I have found many people can be very generous. They're the ones that are helping out at fundraisers and, supporting different not-for-profits. But if they don't have the capacity to do that anymore, and they're just looking after their own families, then those not-for-profits that are actually serving quite often the most vulnerable in the community are even more hard-pressed to meet their objectives to help people that really need help.
And we all know what happens when people have less disposable income, right? I hate to say it, but you're not going out to eat as much. You're probably not going for different types of entertainment, whether a movie or otherwise. You start to cut back on those things, and that's where you see the beginning of something more serious coming down the line. And I think this is where this government is taking us with their policies, right? The stuff that people like to spend their money on to get some enjoyment out of life are being slowly taken away from them.
Yeah, we've seen that. And I mean, we've seen in many communities Restaurants have closed. You know, small businesses are having a really tough time. Many of them, and there's a lot of evidence on this, that many of them still incurred a lot of debt during the pandemic, and they haven't been able to pay that off, and so they're just barely getting by, and their costs have gone up as well. You know, if you're a restaurant, all of your food costs have gone up. Everything that is shipped to you has gone up because of the cost of transportation. And so they're just basically getting by, and we're seeing businesses shuttering, you know, especially in a lot of business improvement areas, downtowns. We see restaurants closing. And I was talking to one restaurant owner longtime restaurant owner, he says, I had to make a decision with my head, not my heart, because I just couldn't, I just can't keep subsidizing it every month.
Exactly.
And that's tough.
Yes.
That's really tough.
And those are things people like to enjoy, but don't you dare, says Mark Holland, the Liberal Minister of Health, take a road trip across Canada. Yeah. That's just, no bathroom breaks, he says. That was a crazy comment. Anyways, we're pretty much out of time, Tracy Gray. As you know, the guests get the last word. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It was really an honor to be here. And I just want everyone to know that myself and our Conservative team is pressing to hold this government to account, but also to make suggestions on policies and legislation that will be impactful, and we do that every day in the House of Commons.
Thank you very much. Tracy Gray, Member of Parliament for Kelowna Lake Country. We thank her for her time. We thank you for yours. Don't forget, this is the summer, but we do not slow down. We will do content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to tell your friends. They can like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.